Excellent. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I do have, in fact, great panelists that I will introduce one at a time in a little bit. But Gary, to your question, sorry, I'm going to hit my topic in a second, but I do want to address the question you asked about travel consolidation, because it's really important. There was a study done, I think in 2023, that actually surveyed a whole bunch of companies from large exhibition companies. I remember Reed and Informa and Clarion and ourselves and others were involved. And I believe a third of the clients said that travel was, in fact, a consolidator, and therefore good for sustainability. I was surprised by how low the number was. But the interesting thing is that the balance, some didn't think it was, but there were others that actually said travel went up because they made so many great connections that they had to go back and do business. So in a way, I wasn't sure if I was happy or sad with the results. But it's an interesting question you raise. Show of hands. I'm going to now talk about my topic. I would love a show of hands of who is worried or believes that there might be some headwinds or there are headwinds in front of us at the moment. Yeah, so a very, very large, many of you think that. Before we start, Tommy, I want to add to Gary's comments. You've done an amazing job with ECA, and we all appreciate that from the industry. I do have a very direct question for you. What the heck have you done for us lately? Like, I want to know. I hear rumors of some positive things that have happened. Can you maybe give us a couple so we're all educated on what ECA has actually done?
Nothing better than when your board chair puts you on the spot in front of a room full of people. No, over the last 4 years, ECA has really become the voice of the business and professional events industry, and that's largely down to all of you. Now, we've had some big wins on Capitol Hill recently. If you've seen, the House of Representatives just voted on some legislation that has some wonderful tax, some wonderful workforce development aspects for us. Folks who were with us on Capitol Hill last year for Legislative Action Day were talking about visa delays. Thanks in partnership to our friends at U.S. Travel and Kevin Hinton, you're going to hear from in just a moment, we were able to secure $50 million to help bring more of our international attendees and exhibitors back to the U.S. We've got the Federal Trade Commission to pass a rule that makes those damn annoying scam emails you see, the list sale scams and the hotel scams, those are now expressly illegal thanks to the industry's voice. So we've done a lot. We've got a lot more to do.
Is there anything in the big, beautiful bill?
We've got some things in the big, beautiful bill. We've got some workforce provisions that will expand 529 plans for certifications offered by some of the associations you just saw. We're going to expand Pell Grants to do workforce training for the first time, so it's not just college programs, but everything we need on the show floor. Riggers, forklift drivers, electricians, carpenters. We'll be able to get Pell Grants to bring them into the industry with skills that all of your organizations can benefit from. We've got some tax provisions that are keep investments going. We're going to keep association shows safe and make sure that we're not attacking corporate tax rates in a way that force some of the cuts you heard earlier around travel and entertainment and advertising. So lots of good news, lots more to come. But Hervé, thank you for your leadership and for all of you who are getting involved with ECA.
Thank you, Tommy. All right, now I'd like to use the word cloud to create a word cloud here. So choose one word that describes your prognosis for the U.S. events industry in the next 18 months. One word. I'll give you 30 seconds. So we have a number of words around these headwinds. They really define headwinds like cautious and challenged and chaotic, uncertainty, of course, uncertain. So that's the feeling, that's the sentiment that we have. There is something that's important though for us as an industry where we need to continue to rally together and not forget the benefit, the why we do what we do. Why we do what we do is so critically important. And that's why many of us are in this business. We really help companies, especially small companies, 85% of our customers are small companies, really create commerce and meet. And in uncertain times, I fundamentally believe they need us more than any other time. So while absolutely there is a ton of uncertainty out there for sure, I also believe that this is a time for us as an industry to really capitalize on what we do extraordinarily well and make sure that everyone understands the platform and the return on investment or return on outcome or return on experience, as was talked about earlier, that we provide. I didn't see that up there on the word cloud, but I think it's also important. And so with that, I'd like to introduce my first panelist, Isabelle Icso. Her expertise is really critical here, Executive Director, International Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. She leads advocacy efforts on trade and investments before the administration, Congress, and foreign governments. She brings sharp, region-specific lens to the Chamber's international work. Before joining the Chamber, Isabelle was a trade and tax policy analyst at the DC-based investment firm Height Capital Markets, where she focused on how policy moves markets. Before that, she spent 5 years as a reporter with Inside U.S. Trade, covering major trade agreements and negotiations, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership, USMCA, please come up, and talks with Japan, Korea, Brazil, etc. So, Isabelle, thank you so much for joining us here. Have a seat, please.
Great.
So we'll start with my first question is really big and broad, and I know you have a few slides. I should give you the clicker, I think.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much.
How are global tariffs impacting the U.S. economy? And you only have a few minutes here. This is not a 3-hour.
No, thank you so much, Hervé, and thank you everyone for being here today. I think, as many of you know, the president has either announced or threatened to announce tariffs on roughly $3 trillion worth of goods, right? So we've seen the 10% universal tariff on all countries and all goods. We've seen tariffs as high as 25% on steel, aluminum, autos, auto parts, as well as their derivatives, again, from all sources. And this is just monumental. He's using the president is using these tariffs as a way to attempt to address the trade deficit, as well as to entice manufacturing back to the U.S., so-called onshoring. But in our view, and in many in the sector's view, without sort of complementary investments in workforce, deregulatory incentives, and other sort of terms of relief, whether that's exclusion processes or otherwise, these policies are really imposing significant burdens on businesses in real time. And this is primarily because they, cannot make long-term decisions in any real form, whether that's via hiring or other sort of investment planning. There are many forms in which these policies are affecting the American public. You mentioned small businesses. These are impacting small businesses in particular who cannot always afford to hire a customs broker to navigate all these different and new layers of complexity, right? They cannot exactly absorb all of the costs, the new costs that they're facing. And when they do pass down that increased cost in the form of higher prices, they're seeing sales volume drop to a point of no return. They're seeing customers walk away, and that's having extremely detrimental effects. So you'll see we hosted a small business day earlier this month that was all about this and the sort of impacts on small businesses and what they can do. I'll also point to a recent survey from the Dallas Fed that showed, I think it was north of 60% of respondents expect tariffs to impact their businesses negatively this year. A separate Michigan-based survey showed north of 50% of respondents, similar thing, expect tariffs to negatively impact their business this year. And whether that's drops in revenue or, like I said, employment, there's a number of ways that these impacts can really rear their ugly heads, and mainly a combination of primary and secondary effects. So by primary, I really mean a direct impact, right? So companies are expecting higher input costs, followed by increased selling prices and longer supplier delivery times. Those are the primary expectations that they're expecting. In terms of secondary impacts, and I expect some of my other panelists to touch on this too, these are really more reputational related, right? So whether that's product boycotts from a sales volume perspective in other countries, choosing not to buy American goods, whether that's reduced travel to the US, which could have cascading impacts on tourism industries and otherwise, and broader impacts more generally on our credibility as a trading and defense partner. And I have to say that's really the one that I'm most concerned about right now, Hervé. And there's a lot of preliminary data. Again, this kind of gets to the secondary impacts, but some data suggesting that countries aren't necessarily canceling existing contracts with the US, but they're not entering into new ones. And again, it's this credibility piece that I just, countries have a lot less patience this time around with the Trump administration, and I hope that, and I understand that the administration is considering these kinds of ramifications as they, consider its objectives, its broader manufacturing objectives, but it's certainly something we're continuing to track and hear about on a daily basis.
So you were lobbying this morning. I know you joined us a little bit late. What are you hearing? What is the reaction?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of concern. I think, on Capitol Hill, it's a lot of folks are coming back from town halls. This is the number one issue on earnings calls and things like that. Just turning to my slides here, we're now facing an effective tariff rate of 21.9%. This is the highest in history, the highest since 1909, and even after consumption shifts, we're not expecting much to change, right? And so, real GDP is 0.8% lower, and in the long run, it's expected to have an impact of $160 billion annually. And then household income, you're looking at roughly $4K decline in average disposable income per household annually. So these are not small impacts that we're talking about here.
How about from the events industry perspective, if you look ahead 12 months, what are some of the things that we should be thinking about or doing or worried about?
It's tough because when you think about the events industry, and I'm also really interested in hearing from my fellow panelists too, but it's pretty services heavy, and when you think about tariffs, they're generally they've never really been imposed on services. It's generally on imports, right? So on goods, tangible goods. But when you think about events industry, there's I think about weddings and trade shows, and those are just the two examples that I chose today. But we get a lot of our seeds and flowers from Canada. Those prices have already gone up. We get a lot of our linens and fabrics from the Western Hemisphere. Those costs have already gone up. So trade is really everywhere, and it's connected to everything. And so I think from that perspective, that's how we're thinking about it. From the trade show perspective, from the construction of booths for a trade show, the steel and aluminum, the benchmark prices have gone up since these tariffs were imposed on March 4th. That's just one example. And as I said, I think that the crux of a trade show is really to sell goods and make connections. And if you're selling a good that's X% higher price because of these tariffs, that's certainly going to be front and center.
And there are differences by sectors, right?
That's right.
Different sector impacts.
Yeah. So actually, that's a great point. And then, this is just one way that we're trying to convey kind of the different effects of per sector, really. And we're, expecting U.S. manufacturing output to expand tangentially, by 2.3% or so. But that expansion is expected to more than crowd out these other sectors. So these are for kind of the sectors that are expected to be most impacted in the short and long term. So construction output is expected to contract, agriculture followed by retail, food, and motor vehicles. So it's really having a cascading impact, and it's all dependent on where your goods are coming from and where you're going. So in terms of advice, get better understandings of your supply chains. Who are your tier 1 suppliers? Who are your tier 2 suppliers? The better grasp of your supply chains that you have, the more agile you'll be able to be, the quicker you'll be able to react to these policies when they do get rolled out.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Any other slides?
Nope. That's it.
Great. So now I'd like to welcome Kevin Hinton to the stage. He's the managing director of group travel, the U.S. Travel Association, where he leads strategic initiatives to grow and advocate for the group travel sector. He most recently served as executive vice president of strategy and association consultancy, Minding Your Business. Prior to that, Kevin was a CEO of both Hinton and Gruch, a Society for Incentive Travel Excellence, where he helped shape global standards for incentive and group travel. A longtime industry leader, Kevin also served as international board chair for Meeting Professionals MPI and held an executive role at Associated Luxury Hotels International. So Kevin, thank you so much for joining us here. Now, can you tell us who is U.S. Travel? What do you do?
Sure. Great to be here. Thank you for having me as well. Appreciate your thoughts. And Hervé, thanks for the opportunity. Sam as well to join this conversation. I do have some slides just to provide a little bit of guidance for the story about who U.S. Travel is. So we'll start at the highest level. Our mission is to increase travel to and within the United States. And we do that through 4 key priorities. And really going to focus on really talking about the first 2, which is to establish travel as essential and responsible. Within that, we certainly speak about the importance of meetings as being essential and responsible. And then improving the travel experience from point A to point B. We look holistically at the entirety of the travel industry. Our members are hotel companies, airlines, destinations, attractions, and other ally members, companies that rely upon and work within the various segments of the travel industry. It's a $1.3 trillion industry in the US, powering 15 million jobs. You can see how it breaks down overall. Group travel is really everyone in this room, and so we're a significant part of generating economic impact across the country, and you can see how we compare with some of the other sectors. Let me just talk briefly about where I'm focusing with our members on group travel, and really just the first 2. One is to better define and measure the impact of the biggest components of group travel. Sometimes we as an industry don't have the same set of facts, or we use different figures. And so this is our first priority, which is to establish a common set of facts that all of us can use, working with different organizations, include some of the organizations that were mentioned earlier with ECA, to make sure that we are creating a sense of credibility for our industry and using similar numbers, regardless of whom we're talking to, from the standpoint of really explaining our economic impact overall. And secondly is to develop a campaign approach to shaping perceptions at business events. All right, we know the value, and we've talked a lot about that. We heard that word a lot today. And whether we talk in terms of return on investment, return on experience, regardless, how do we better convey a compelling story about how gathering in person, the face-to-face meetings, power careers, industries, right, society at large, and take that to business leaders, to business media, to policymakers as well, so that they have a better appreciation for the work that we do every day. We are currently in a travel trade deficit. That wasn't always the case in travel. We were, as you can see on the slide, and it's not so important the actual numbers, but you can see we used to be in a travel trade surplus, where international visitors spent more in the United States than we spent when we traveled abroad. Now, certainly the strong dollar over the past many years has contributed a lot of this, but we want to get back to a travel trade surplus, and we feel like that's an opportunity for us to really engage with the current administration around the importance of our industry. No question, though, we've got some challenges. Uncertainty, we've heard that word a few times today. That's really become the norm and unlikely to change anytime soon. I'll talk a little bit about lagging international arrivals. We certainly have talked about the concerns about international attendees at our events. There are those who are questioning whether or not they're welcome here in the U.S. And then scrutiny of government travel, which has spilled over into the crucial aspects of having federal agency employees at our meetings. The funding for that, we were talking earlier about, just the inability for some government employees to attend our events, which can devalue what we offer to other attendees. I have some good news, even though it may be a bit surprising, but everybody knew that in March, international arrivals to the US dropped pretty dramatically by almost 12%, and yet in April we saw kind of a reversal of that. Some would attribute that to the late Easter holiday. So this doesn't mean that we've recovered. It just means that we want to be speaking in real time, and this demonstrates that. Look, so far this year, 10.2 million international arrivals into the US is basically just under 1% of what it was a year ago. That doesn't mean that this will continue, but what we want to really focus on is, and you can see kind of at the bottom of this chart, is that across Europe it has translated very differently based on the different country of origin. Last week I was at the IMEX Frankfurt trade show talking with international event organizers about their interest in coming to the US. And here's literally some of the things that I heard. Is it safe? Do I need to get a burner phone? Our clients don't want to go to the US right now. It seems too risky, right? Maybe we'll just wait it out. But we'll be back, but we may just wait it out. But also, an Argentinian friend of mine who said, do you know who the president of Argentina is right now? For them, this is normal. So for them, it's not an issue, right? So we have to really think about the world is a big place, and there's lots of opportunity for us to think about how we can shift that international attendance at our meetings. But no question, we will pay close attention to this. This is information we're sharing with the administration so that they have at least hearing from us. I can't say they have an understanding or an appreciation, but they're certainly hearing from us about the negative impacts on our industry. And I know that from talking with many event organizers, some are seeing 10% loss of international attendees. At the same time, some are seeing very strong attendance. So I just wanted to share a little bit of perspective from what we heard. Our message last week to people from around the world, there were 15,000 people from 160 countries at IMEX was, first of all, the US is open for business. That's our primary objective, is to make sure that potential visitors, whether they're coming for business or tourism, that they know that they're welcome here. The policies around visa entry into the United States have not changed. I think we can all appreciate that the enforcement of the existing rules has gotten more stringent. As I talked to buyers from around the world, they all talked about the same 5 or 6 people. The French scientist who was not admitted into Houston, or the German teenagers who were not allowed into Hawaii. These are real examples, but to them, they think that is the norm, and it's not. And so really kind of dispelling some of that. If we look at where group travel is overall, this is just a chart. It's not so important to see the exact numbers, but just to show that this is a 6-month trailing average. This is looking at DMOs, 250 DMOs, taking data directly from their CRMs, showing that group travel, again, through the end of March, ticked up. We're going to pay close attention to this. I think there's a sentiment in the room that we doubt that this will continue, but let's make sure that we're staying with what is actually happening as we continue to talk about the value of our industry. What's working for us with this administration? We heard some great success stories that Tommy shared earlier. We're talking in terms that are really allowing us to utilize these big events that are coming to the US over the next 10 years. The Ryder Cup this summer, the World Cup next year, the Olympics in 2028. The golden age of travel in the United States, right? Showcase America's greatness. Talking in terms that really resonate with the administration so that they see the opportunity that we see. And it's been effective in getting their attention focused on the things that we want to get accomplished. We've released this report on seamless and secure travel in February after a year-long process. Our first recommendation was to form a presidential task force on the FIFA World Cup. You might have seen last month, Jeff Freeman, our president and CEO, attended the first meeting of that task force with the president and the vice president. The vice president actually said, we look forward to welcoming visitors from around the world. He did also say, don't overstay, otherwise you're going to have to talk to Secretary Noem. We'd prefer that not be part of it, but that just demonstrates the mentality of some of the members of the administration. Very focused on welcoming and then not overstaying. And so we just need to be attuned to that. Other things that were part of that report, we're looking at how can we help the government be more efficient and more innovative in terms of the experience at our borders. It's not just hiring more Customs and Border Protection personnel, it's also investing in biometrics. It's investing in systems that will allow for that screening process to still have the net effect that we want, which is we know who's traveling here and we're providing safe and secure, but we're also not creating an overburden on our travelers, right? So reforming the visa wait process, and I'll just finish up here that we've suggested establishing a national vetting service that would allow for significantly greater capacity to process visas. There is some progress on that front. Here's what I would leave you with is that we should all know that our industry is a significant contributor to this economy and to jobs across the country. And what I would suggest is that what we've already done and what we already know, which is we need to make sure that we're clear on the importance of our meeting. What is the value of attending, especially if you're looking to get federal government employees to attend, which is a challenge. That justification got that much more difficult. How can their attendance at that event help them be better at their job? That is really what they're looking for, in addition to lowering the overall costs. Engage your international attendees. This may be an opportunity to look at virtual and hybrid opportunities, say that a bit quietly, but I think there are going to be folks that opt out in the short term. And so how do we make sure that we're continuing to build that relationship with them? Look at ways to revise your budget. I'm talking on the revenue side. Who are some of those audiences? Young professionals may present a growth opportunity from a domestic audience. And then what are those countries that aren't as sensitive to some of the geopolitical issues that we're facing in this country, and maybe shift some of your focus from perhaps some of your tried and true markets to some growth markets around the world. And then let's keep to the facts. Let's be the ones who are talking about the importance of what we do, the importance of meeting face to face, and the importance of our industry. So. Sorry for making more of a presentation, everybody.
This is
I think
great,
you have some
Kevin.
questions.
I have a few takeaways, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
One is U.S. travel plays a really essential role in our industry in really advocating for us holistically, and you guys do a really good job at that, so thank you. I know you partner very, very closely with Tommy and the ECA to really help drive the agenda, because you have a much bigger voice than ECA, and leveraging some of the work that you're doing is really essential. That's one key message. Another key message is your data point. I think that's critical, that we stay grounded on the data and the facts and so forth. Third key point, which I just realized as you were speaking about some of the large events like the Olympics and FIFA and Ryder Cup and so forth, is speaking in terms of the administration understands. So talking about how do we get big crowds at those events will help kind of drive our agenda. And I think that's a very intelligent way to position the kind of outcomes that we want, which is open borders. We want the U.S. to be competitive. Mm-hmm. And so we need to be a destination, open the borders, and in a way that's welcoming to visitors. Open the borders in the right way in order to welcome the right visitors into the country. So, and lastly, and this is something that we've seen at Emerald, is while we have clearly been hit with a reduction of travelers from some countries, China and Canada in particular, we are seeing a real increase from other countries. Brazil, for sure, Turkey, Middle East, some countries where we had very little attendance in the past have now increased dramatically. So there are some countries out there that are taking advantage of the situation that China is in, for example, and really trying to leverage that. And so I do agree with your recommendation that we need to focus on countries that are trying to take advantage of that. So thank you. That was very, very helpful.
Thanks, Hervé.
Rich, you're next. Rich Scarfo, President of Health. where he spent the past 7 years transforming it into a world's leading events for healthcare innovation. He has also led the launch of Health Europe and was the driving force behind Vive, now a premier gathering for C-suite leaders in digital health and health IT. Rich's career spans leadership roles across CES, E3, HIMSS, and the Foundation for the NIH. He created the mHealth Summit, which was later acquired by HIMSS, where he launched the Personal Connected Health Alliance. Throughout his career, Rich has consistently reimagined how industries convene, building platforms that break convention and deliver measurable impact. Rich, thank you very much for being here. Your industry is a particularly interesting industry in this time in terms of the impact of some of the administration's actions around whether they're workforce reductions, executive orders, and so forth. Can you talk a little bit and educate us a little bit on that?
Sure. We're seeing things in very different ways in healthcare. In looking at some of the things that are in front of us, with executive orders, it's signed one day, it's blocked the next. With tariffs, they're imposed and then they're retracted. So I think the key thing for us right now is looking at the uncertainty. The biggest things that we're seeing that are affecting our events immediately, because all of this is very early. We really don't know what the next year will look like. We are seeing an immediate halt in government travel. So that's a big problem, especially in healthcare. We're seeing leaders that we need to drive key conversations not able to attend the event. And these are at secretary level throughout government. We're also seeing other government leaders that are coming to our events and paying on their own. So we're seeing a shift in that's very immediate. I think the thought leadership aspect of what we will lose is important. The networking aspect, because you look at an event like Health or Vive where 55% of our audience is VP level and above. So these are targeted events in terms of being marketplaces, thought leadership gatherings, and networking. And so that piece of it will be very compromised in, I think, the very near term. So we're seeing that already for Health Europe, and then Health in October. We're already redirecting on that one.
So given that background and the landscape that you just described, how are you adapting Health to make sure that you remain competitive, that you're still the destination for the industry?
So I think we're in a replace and then fix mode. So right now we're looking at what we may be losing from the event, and that will be some sectors like government. And what do we replace that with? Not all of this will be bad in the next year. And I think that's the thing that we have to focus on. I think COVID shut us down, and I think what we're in now is just slowing us down. And any company, and we've all talked about this a few years ago at this very event, if you didn't look at COVID in a way that you came out on the other side of it in a better place, not just where you were, then you've already lost. It's the same approach that we're taking right now. So we're looking at how do we bring in other voices that are filling the gaps. So we hear a lot in healthcare around underserved communities, the most vulnerable, those without health care, and those are being hit the hardest right now because a lot of the programs that are disappearing serving those communities. What we're seeing step into that space are more philanthropy, foundations, and different approaches. So our events focus on healthcare innovation, and at times like this, events focusing on innovation can thrive because you have to find other ways of doing things. Gary mentioned this earlier, that not all of this will be bad. It will clean some of it out. It'll give us a new way of doing things, and hopefully we'll see that in healthcare. And I think the U.S. is very resilient in a lot of ways. I do think the challenge that we're facing right now is, we're going through such an erratic period where things don't make sense. So I think if it continues, then we'll have to sort of quiet some of that and really focus on the industry issues that will drive us forward.
How's your team coping with the change? And from a talent management perspective, are there some things that you're doing and thinking about, or the team is going through, that we can learn from?
Yeah, our the joke at the office is that I'm a part-time therapist. So we have a very diverse team. So we purposefully hired very young team without event experience for certain things that we do because it gives us a very creative approach. We've surrounded that team with a more experienced, and slightly older team like me that really helps us build the company with both a creative approach but a sound business model. So what we're finding is that with the younger members on the team, they're very expressive. They're very willing to discuss the things that they're worried about, the things they stand for, and the things that are bothering them. So there's been a lot of that in the office. There's been a request for more team outings and things like that. So I think that's been the biggest impact, is seeing how quickly things impact people that they're passionate about. And healthcare, as we say, is personal.
Yeah. So can you be our therapist here for a little bit and help us? What are some of the things that we should be thinking about and doing as event organizers that, given all the changes and the pressures that we're under?
Yeah. I can only speak from our perspective, but we launched Health and Vive and Health Europe with a different model in mind. And that was to step away from the massive booths on the show floor and 30,000, 40,000 people. Not that they're bad, I think they're wonderful events, but they serve a purpose. Going back to what we're focusing on, we started a model that right-sized activations. And that's serving us well right now. What we're seeing is a shift, and I think Janine mentioned earlier, return not on investment, but on experience and value. And our event coming up, we will have about 900 sponsors. We've already sold 300 booth packages, meaning that's a company coming in and not bringing their own booth. That's double what it was last year already, and we're still going. So I think creative ways to help companies engage, because we are seeing in uncertain times, and the economy's uncertain right now, a lot of things are uncertain. The first thing that goes, budgets get reduced, the number of people that go to shows get downsized. So we're looking at ways to do things that help companies activate in a way that still aligns with their vision, but at a cost-effective way. So we're pushing things at the event now and seeing growth in them. One is the booth package model. The second is we have a meetings program, and we already have 8,000 meetings sold for health this year. Last year, we capped out at 6,000. So what that's telling us is twofold. On the buyer side, they don't pay to come to the event. We've seen a surge in applications. On the sponsor side, they really need those meetings because regardless of what's happening, people still have to do business. And our events, all of our events, are either marketplaces or industry events or a combination. So for us, we're very heavily focused on that marketplace aspect. So that's another thing we've done. We've also looked at how we can be more creative for sponsors and save them money. So two things that we're doing this year. We've created an art gallery and a speakeasy. And I know others have done those, but we're doing them in a way that companies are hosting events in them throughout the event. The art gallery, we've done it in the past around COVID experiences. What we're doing this year is community health centers, so we'll represent all 50 states. But instead of just having that as a networking area, we've turned it into a reception area. So we're allowing companies to move events out of restaurants and for a fraction of the price, do it in a setting that's not just a meeting room. So I think that's been really beneficial for us as well. We're doing other things that we never thought we would be involved in, and these are very bespoke approaches. So we have very large companies. In fact, I can give you an exact example. We had a company last year, their overall budget was like $1.2 million for the event. And not to us, but they're all in. This year, it was cut down to $500,000. And their first inclination was, we need to sit the event out because we don't think we can do it at the level that would represent us very well. Our team went back to them and said, if you give us the full 500 and your wish list, we will come back to you with a package that aligns with your vision. So we increased what they gave us by 400%. They are now seeing the value in what we can offer them, but it's forced us to have a more intimate relationship with our vendors, because we're doing things like building pieces or acquiring pieces from our vendor that we amortize over 2 years and 2 different events. So it's 4 events. So it's helping us to do business in a very different way. So it's really just changed the model for everything. The other thing that we're doing is we have an all-inclusive event. So it is, food is included, all the evening events, and that's been really helpful because we have started to articulate the value of that to companies, because we've heard back from them what it means to them to be able to bring 5 team members to the event and not have to pay for any food. So there are a lot of things that we're learning. I think the most important thing is, we have to know our customers, their pain points and their needs, and how we can meet them where they are. And if we didn't learn that during COVID, then I think this is going to be a really tough year for people.
It's a really good point. And India talked about that earlier in her presentation as they've transformed RX's sales strategy. And I think it is a big learning for all of us in terms of how do you re-engage with customers in a different way, understanding how they define value and then building a corresponding solution. So thank you. Thank you all very much for your time today. Now we're going to turn it over for some Q&A, and I think, Sam, you're going to lead that, right?
I am. If I can get this thing moved over. Will you please help me with that? I'll ask the first question. It's in the bottom. I'll ask the first question. Thank you.
Is it working?
Yes. Yes. And I'm working. We're all working. Thank you. I got it. The earlier Gary was asked a question about, I think it was in the Middle East, giant shows that are growing, and how's that going to happen to Vegas and our big shows in this country where we always felt we had the biggest. All 4 of you, what's happening as far as, well, if the United States if we're feeling this way about the United States, are we going to shows elsewhere? Are we going to reevaluate our budgets? Are we going to open new shows in Europe? I mean, the really good point that it's an early stage. So this year, next time, what are we going to be talking about, and what are we going to be seeing about possibly losing exhibitors or marketing dollars or events to other countries?
I'm happy to start. I really don't see the world as a glass half empty kind of person. The U.S. is the strongest country in the world, and I don't think that that's going to change. It's going to change anytime soon. There are definitely some headwinds that we have to deal with, but as businesses, we actually react well to dealing with these headwinds. Like, we have problems in China and Canada, we go find customers in other markets that are dying to come to the US market. It's the largest market, largest consumer base. It's not going to go away. That's not going to happen regardless of who's president and what the policy is. The other thing is that there's changes to administrations and policies in Congress and midterms and so forth. So I don't see this as something that's going to dramatically affect the U.S. market. I'm very, very bullish on the U.S. market. I think it's the strongest market in the world, and I don't see a replacement to the U.S. market at all.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. I think you're wise to view this through the lens of midterms, right? I mean, that's kind of the temporally speaking where a lot of these policies are being benchmarked, right? And that's kind of the runway that the president has with a lot of these tariffs in particular. I think with respect to what you were saying, whether middle groups of countries are going to be presented with choices, US, China, that's going to become increasingly prevalent. But ultimately, the more we travel, the more we hear from foreign delegations, people want to do business with the US. They want to invest more in the US. And so I think focusing on creating a resilient and stable environment to facilitate those kinds of policies is going to be extremely important, and something I hope the administration really tries to emphasize more than these tariffs in the coming months as well.
Yeah, I would say we're doing a couple of things. We reintroduced a product that we had a few years ago that did reasonably well. It's called Entree, and they're bespoke dinners, and we're now doing them around the world. And they're 30 people, Jeffersonian style. And that has been something that is helping. We're taking our meetings program virtual. And just going back to the replace, we have for the first time a Latin American summit at our health event in October. So we have 350 healthcare executives coming from Latin America for the first time. So, like I said, there are ways to get around this and to focus. We're also introducing new marketplaces at the event. And as we lose an NIH startup pavilion, we're replacing it with a pavilion from a pharma company that is curating startups. So you just have to know which way to go and be ready to pivot.
Just a quick add, I mentioned I was at IMEX last week in Frankfurt and talking with national tourism boards from various countries. I heard a lot of their strategies are based on sectors where they feel they have a competitive advantage, and so really focusing their sales and marketing efforts on the types of business events that really align with their national strengths, their national assets, and so we ought to be focusing on that ourselves as well to ensure that we're keeping pace with the competitive nature of our business.
All right, thank you. I'm having all kinds of troubles with my mic. Who else has any? Here we go.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, Ian Sterling from Exhibition World. With the possible reduction in numbers for events coming in from international, is investing in the virtual and hybrid element worth looking at again just to cover those people that might not be coming? Is that something you consider again?
I think, Rich, you were talking a little bit about that earlier.
I would say lightly, it's good to have as an option. We're still finding that people want to be together. They want to network. For us, the United States still has the top healthcare institutions. We have the largest amount of funding available to digital health startups. And it is a destination for the world to come to continue to do business in advanced healthcare. So I would say, we're offering it we have another product called Health Community, and that is something that throughout the year does virtual meetups. So we have that as something to fall back on and maybe enhance some of our networking. But for the most part, we are focused solely on in-person meetups.
Ian, I would just add, and I mentioned it briefly, not to shy away from that. I mean, there are going to be folks that consider not coming to events for some period of time, and they may still want access to what we have to offer. And so it certainly doesn't replace what they would benefit from being in face-to-face, but it allows us to really demonstrate that we still care about them as a customer, as a stakeholder, as a partner. And so providing that access seems to make sense. It doesn't replace, maybe it's more of a Band-Aid short-term solution, but I did hear some of that when I was talking with different folks last week at IMEX, and so I think it has a place in the overall portfolio, the overall engagement strategy, I would think.
Any other questions? Yes.
We're seeing two things, and I'm wondering if others are. One is companies that are American-based but have a lot of foreign inputs are cutting back. And then foreign companies, especially those that are manufacturing equipment that's assembled here, are doing the same thing. And I'm wondering if you guys are seeing that because it affects not only sponsorship sales, but it's also affecting attendance, because we're seeing companies that want to talk to those other companies deciding not to come.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's certainly on the top of a lot of folks' minds, so you're not alone there. I would say that a good place to focus on is where the administration is focusing, which is on Chinese content, right? So the administration is almost explicitly focused on stripping out Chinese content from American-made products. So to the extent that you can gain visibility into, like I said, into your supply chains and get an understanding of where those inputs are coming from, if they're coming from China, that's, it's worrisome, not only because of the tariff situation, but also from a sort of reliance on a foreign adversary type situation, especially if it's a national security related input, that kind of thing. It really does change the context. So I would say focus on that is in terms of that. I think in general, the administration is also trying to, like I said, entice all facets of manufacturing back to the U.S. So that includes assembly, it includes processing, design. Right now, our comparative advantage is in a lot of the processing and design, and we outsource a lot of the assembly work because of different labor rates that are closer by in different countries. So to the extent that you're able to move that to the U.S. and be able to demonstrate that will probably lead to a more favorable outcome if there is ever an exclusion process stood up, for example. So if you need an exclusion from a tariff, and you say, look, I've done 90% of my manufacturing and assembly in the U.S., but this 10% simply isn't available domestically, or I cannot do it domestically. Can you help me out? I think that will be a much easier sort of argument for you to make to the administration, if that makes sense.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. This was an excellent session on headwinds. Thank you.